Great. Thank you, everyone, for coming to McLaughlin Gardens 2026. This is presentation number 3, and today we are joined by Jana Magnuson, who is a Maine Master Naturalist, and she has her presentation today, which is Frogs of Maine, their amphibious and seasonal lives. By the end of this presentation, you will know how to identify all of the different Maine and where to find them. Before we hand it over to Jana, I just want to thank everyone for supporting the garden. We can't do this kind of programming without your help, and we really appreciate it. So if you're able to continue to support the garden through a small donation or a donation box out the kitchen or the dining room, online we have the chat where they can make a donation on our website. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, your hand up online, you can ask it in the chat and we'll be sure to relay that to Jana. So without further ado, Jana Magnuson.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming today. I'm really excited to share this subject matter. Of course, I've spoken, I've given at the gardens before, but in this case, because of the winter ecology series, I really wanted to tailor the talk today up to a little bit more emphasizing eco-themes and some other themes relating to the lives of frogs in Maine that I think will tie in to those of you who have been to look at sort of winter ecology really throughout the year. And this can kind of take you through a lot of different aspects of frogs' lives that occur. So here I give quiz to the live audience, and it was to sort of try to why I had put the frog on this cover slide. So it wasn't completely random. We have species of frogs in Maine, you might know, and I have divided those up, not in a really super important way in this talk, but I've divided them up into 3 groups basically. And I'm not the only one to have done that. I mean, you can, but those are kind of commonly thought of groups for those. What I did here was look traditional tree frogs, the ones that live in the woods and the trees, again during the that would be on the left. Then what we call meadow frogs in Maine, they've been called, field frog or grass frogs is a common name in the middle. And then what we think of as pond frogs or real water frogs that really stay in the water throughout their so that's really what I was doing, was lining them up. I wanted to just to get back to the theme, the ecology. We're going to talk about the species, as I mentioned. We're going to talk about important, or you'll see as we talk about the species how important wetland ecology are to frogs. I mean, this is just basic knowledge about think of them in ponds and wet areas, but are they always in ponds and wet areas? No, I mean, they're up on uplands. They're, as I say, in meadows, and then one species, of course, that you all know and love really spends most of its time dry land, as we'll do. And then we'll talk in that wetland theme. We're going to certainly talk a little bit about vernal pools, a very specialized wetland that some species of frogs can use a vernal pool, an ephemeral springtime pool that may be disappeared. But some particular is really it requires a vernal pool, what we call an obligate species, meaning it actually indicates that body of water is a vernal pool if it's using it to breed. We're going to talk about, of course, the very famous life cycle of the frog that everybody knows and has looked at from the time you're a child. It really is to be fascinating. You think about the metamorphosis that the frog goes through. Some seasonal patterns again, I chose a minute ago, just sort of what frogs are doing throughout the year and where they're going and how they live their lives differently. They eat and who eats them, in other words, where do they fit in the food web? That's obviously a key component of ecology. And what adaptations, and this is real adaptations that have made frogs so successful as as animals are the sort of also create situation be vulnerabilities in today's world. So that's kind of something else we want to look at. Not topics I'm going to go through. These are just topics that I want you to be thinking about as we meet to speak, because they'll come up over and over again. And then finally, also temperature related issues like lives through 4 Maine, so how do they do that? And just sort of thermodynamics and sort of how they're in terms of heat as well. So those are I said those now because I just want you to sort of have those concepts in mind as we walk through the different species. I didn't really have anything too much more to say about this slide. And does anybody want to know these particular species are? I think I'll left you all. Anybody want to say? So we've got a spring peeper there on the left. Up above are the spring peeper's eggs. We'll see those in another slide. In the middle, and that again, that's one of our tree frogs. Then in the middle, we've got a pickerel frog, and that's a typical grass frog, a meadow frog. So in the summer, that's pretty much where you might find one. And then, you guys know what that frog is? Anybody? Oh, we got a bullfrog up on the. I think my picture is obscuring him a little bit. And underneath, we've tadpole. So he's in the process of developing. I'm saying he, by the way, wonders in these presentations, but I don't know that frog. I was telling the group, he's a friend of my camp. And I don't know the tadpole, but I do know that that's a he. So I will. So you'll excuse me on this occasion. Okay, so I already alluded to this. Frogs are amphibian. I didn't say that. Frogs are amphibians. Okay, amphibians have an extra life cycle. They're unique in a lot of ways, as we'll talk about today. But I like words, and I just thought it was interesting. I mean, amphibian. From amphi means double or both sides. So we use for amphora, that type. It's an ancient vessel with 2 handles. I particularly like that one by Potter, Alan Freewald. That is has 2 frogs as its handle, so I thought it was perfect for this. And then amphitheater just means coming around, so can see and hear the production. So that's what we've got as a double life, or both sides of life. And the double life that I believe is probably intended by that, as you can imagine, is a watery life and a land-based or terrestrial life for the animal. And also, I should say that amphibians in Maine aren't just frogs. We have one other order, which is the salamander order, called Chordata. Actually, frogs are Anura. The salamanders we're not really going to talk much about today. There a little bit will come into the picture, but there is one in the world. There is another type of amphibian that doesn't live in Maine. In fact, it lives in the tropical regions. It's legless and small amphibian. As I say, we don't have here. So here's the. I really like this diagram. Or the picture, excuse me, on the right, especially because just kind of nicely and kind of artistically puts every stage of life in one place. So it's just kind of nice. And what you want to do, I'm just going to use the pointer for a second, is starting well, I added the starting point because it wasn't in the picture. So here's where we start, and I'll talk about that. Then we've got eggs. The eggs here kind of bother me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But there they are. And then we've got development within the egg. So here, early development, later development, you start to see the tadpoles start to develop and grow within the eggs and then hatch. And then we've got coming up here, eating the vegetation. And actually what they're doing here, I think, is scraping algae off of those underwater plants. And then there's kind of a S shape here. Then they start to grow and develop bigger, and you can even see the tail here, more development. The development starts proceed. We've got hind legs coming, and then the tail really starts, usually really shrink, although in this picture they're not seeing it yet. But then the forelegs start to develop as well. And then art actually doesn't show this very well, but basically the greater leg development, the shrinking of the tail occurs at the same time. And that's because the body is really ingesting and metabolizing the tail to develop the legs. And then by the time they come out, you will see frogs or age sometimes coming on land where they still do have a tail, but by the time they really emerge and do all the things we're going to do lives, they have lost the tail, and then they are adult frogs. So I just want to go back and say that that first picture here, you will see doing this. Now I'm having what it's called is amplexus. It's not sexual mating as mammals would do. Actually, the female, which is often larger as in this frog here on the bottom, and you can see it looks like pregnant. Of course, it's really eggs in here with the big area for the storing of the egg. What will happen, and this is all loud and very busy, very frenzied when this is happening, as you know. The male will grab and actually has special adaptations on its pads to hold on to the female, kind of muckle on and get on, and then not let go. And that is to not let go of the female, but also to keep other males from getting involved, which they often see sometimes like a pile up, all on the poor female. And then the male will wait, and kind of this activity stimulates the eggs, at which point the male is perfectly situated to fertilize them. And so this is happening. That's the key thing I wanted to say. This is an external thing that's happening of the egg on the egg. The other thing I want you to hard to see in this picture, but dogs are actually located on the egg, sitting on a bunch of other eggs that have been laid by other frogs. So that in this evening and this night that's happening, you've got to imagine lots of frogs on this pond making noise, and they are this female may have, sometimes they do, crawl across the egg rafts, they're called, that are up on top, to get into a central location so that her eggs will actually be in a less vulnerable position. Okay, so that's important because these eggs are protein being deposited right in the middle of a pond spring when everybody is not moving. So this is so by having your own eggs in the middle of that group, it's probably an advantage. A couple other things I want to say about the tadpoles. The thing I said I didn't like about the eggs, that it's wrong. It's just that when I take folks to vernal pool to look at the eggs of this particular species that's in the picture, they tend to be, well, they are often submerged, but we see a lot up on the surface too. So I kind of wish they were up there so you could kind of get a sense. That's all. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just like to think about them up on the surface like they are in the picture of the amplexus. How are the tadpoles getting oxygen during this time period that they're living underwater? you can kind of tell. Anybody have any thoughts on that? They're breathing. I think Corey's pointing to his. He's going like this. It looks like maybe he had gills that. Yeah, exactly. They are respirating the does through gills, and as they develop, you can start to see. In fact, that picture, but the picture I have of the bullfrog larva or tadpole had some feathery gills here. That again, those are going to shrink in and actually be, kind of disappear into the body. But then that's how we breathe. There is another aspect of breathing that is as they develop, and certainly the adult this through their whole too. Not only developing lungs, which the adult frog will just pulmonary respiration we have through lungs, but frogs have an amazing do oxygen exchange through their bodies, and that's because they have this permeable skin. It's going to come up over and over again while I'm talking to you about these frogs, because they have skin that is gas and other gases and liquids are able to just go through our skin, for instance, or a mammal's skin, certainly a reptile skin, for instance. And so they are, and again, if that picture I had up about with the bullfrog that I said I knew, was sitting as in the water, as you'll often see a frog, kind of head up, body below. That frog often will be breathing in two ways at once. Like, so they're breathing, they're sitting there, and they breathe through the pulmonary. So the air's going, oxygen's going in through their neck for the most part, not that's the typical entry point. And then they're underwater, kind of absorbing oxygen from the oxygen they're in. So they're oftentimes there. That's kind of they're getting their oxygen, because they obviously need, like we all do, need to have plentiful oxygen. And other things I'll just quickly mention, and I'm spending more time on this because it kind of shows you all the different life stages, so that I can talk about both, all of them. I think we've all probably learned in school that frogs are ectothermic, so they are not creating their own heat like a mammal would, are getting or absorbing heat from outside environmental sources. That's kind of that definition. But the concept that's also really important for frogs is that they're what's called poikilothermic. It just means that it's independent of their cold-bloodedness. It's that they're a type of creature, and there are other creatures too like this, tolerate a wide variety of temperature. We're going to see that too, because as I mentioned before, and we were referencing Maine's weather, right? They can live in Maine. They can live even in harsher environments than Maine, both ways: heat, hotter, colder, wetter, drier. So they are not a animal that is super specific to one range, small range of temperatures at all.
Yeah, there's a vernal pool near my home, and I see the eggs together floating.
Mm-hmm.
So when they lay the eggs, do they go into the water to lay them, and then just happen to float up, or do they on the land? Do they lay the eggs?
So I don't know if everybody can hear the question, but the question is, where do the frogs lay these eggs? Are they laying them in water or land? First of all, are they laying water? Are they laying them sort of on the top, or where? Water is going to be necessary for laying eggs of the species, all the species. So they're laying them in water, and that's going to be, the reason is pretty clear, because the tadpoles themselves would not be able to navigate and move, to the water source. So they're going to be in the water when they have. Then no, and you pools, and again, I want to stress, I'm so glad you said that, because this particular slide, and I meant to say, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. This is going to be our first species that we look at, actually. That's the other reason I like this slide. It's the wood frog. The wood frog is a frog in Maine, the only frog in Maine that has to be really in a vernal pool. I'm not saying that there's never been a wood frog that's inside a vernal pool, but they really require for success a vernal pool. And they have what's called, back to the rest of the question, but I just want to say they have a high fidelity, is what it's called, to the vernal pool that they were born in. So they actually will try to go back to the vernal pool that they originated, they hatched in. But some species, some individuals actually, they'll lay their eggs wherever the eggs have a chance. So some of them really do look for submerged, and they want their eggs to be sort of down under suches or attached to something. And some of them really do. Bullfrog would be an example. And again, like wood frogs, I see this a lot. Will have these rafts up on the top of the water surface that you'll see. They can be quite large, actually, right? Conglomerates. And then I'll remember in a minute we'll get to the jelly part, because I'm going to talk about that in a slide. Okay, I think I covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about. Just notice that the extremely intricate life cycle, and we'll get back to that with other concepts. All right, let's see. I think we have frog, which is perfect. I am going to now introduce you. If this on, yes, it is. This is what the wood frog sounds like. You probably all heard it in the woods. It's the earliest. It's one of the earliest frogs you're going to hear in Maine, but you do need to be in the wood near a vernal pool really to hear it. Well, the sound carries, and maybe you've heard this before, and I will play it for you right now. Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Yeah.
Sounds like ducks.
Could they be happening like yesterday?
Yeah, this would be a time that you could hear them.
Okay.
It's a little early, I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay.
This is a lot of them, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you would think that maybe you were hearing ducks in the spring if you heard that. Okay, I don't know why it didn't go over to my speaker. I think my speaker just sort of kicked out. So I'll try to make sure that. Here we go. That's why. So, all right, come on, we'll see. So I wanted to play that for you because, and your question about are they out already? I have seen in the past couple, now that rain a couple nights ago, people did start to see some wood frogs making their way to vernal pools. So they're out. Don't know that they're, we still got a lot of ice. Well, that brings me directly to my next point about wood frogs, which is the most fascinating thing that people often know about them. They're a northern frog. They live in the northern latitudes, and they live even above the Arctic Circle. They're the only frog that you can find above the Arctic Circle living and breeding. So they spend the winter hibernating in the woods in rotten log, leaves and stump, leaf litter and other things in the forest. But they're adapted for cold. So famously, they will freeze solid. They have they use the glucose, I guess, it is in their body to create an antifreeze, natural antifreeze. And they will just like I said, they're like a solid rock, and then they can spend the winter that way, and they can survive. Then when they thaw in the spring, they thaw slowly. This is all to prevent damage to their cells, because if ice gets into cells, it rupture and can cut them and open them and damage and destroy them. So so the ice won't form. They survive in that hybrid stage, and then they thaw slowly. And then in the spring, they first out of the snow. Like that picture is to show you that there's snow on those frogs. They're heading to their mating vernal pool there. And then I also wanted to show you, I mean, just to identify them. They're small, right? They're really, you know, among the smaller frogs. They are going to have that black mask. It may not always be so apparent, but the black mask and the white upper lip are really the two things that you'll see in a wood frog that will help you identify. This is just to show you, though, and this is going to come up a lot, and not just in frogs, but if I can leave you with things to remember as you go out and explore, enjoy the outdoors, birds, whatever it might be. Color, unfortunately, in nature, as enjoyable as it is really kind of the least dependable type of identification, because light change does funny things to color, makes color in it, but also just pigmentation and genetics create a variety of colors in a lot of species that are dependable. So I just showed you this. This looks like a group of females to me. I don't know that, but it looks like that's what we're looking at. And they just are quite different. So then just tend to be a little rosier and pinker looking, and the males tend to be, as I say, a little smaller and grayer or browner. But again, that may not always hold true. Those eggs, I want you to just look at there, because that's typical for, and I don't love pictures of people holding eggs, because even though everybody's done it, it can, because I mentioned they're very vulnerable, and they also are deposited sometimes in specific places, like attached to something, and we don't want to sort of disturb what the parent and, but that's a good example of hold up wood frog eggs. They're drippier, if you will, because what's going on there, and we'll get better in the next picture, there's each egg is attached in a group, but they're one outer casing over the whole thing. They're just sort of all individuals in a conglomeration. Okay, so I think I've question.
We had a question.
Yeah.
Trisha was wondering what the shiny copper frogs are.
Shiny copper frogs. Tell you what, let's go through I don't want to forget it, but let's go through, because recognize it among the others.
Okay.
Because I have maybe 3 thoughts in mind about what they might be.
Okay.
So I don't know which one, but it's an interesting question. I think I have this upside down. Okay. So here, now we're going to talk about salamander. This is the only time we're going to talk about them in this talk. I just want you to see that we already looked at the wood frog, and there it is, and each egg is sort of individual. You can see each round. The spotted salamander eggs, which you're going to see in the same vernal pool. So that's why I'm showing you this, because you're going to go out and you're going to see these eggs, and you're going to, or what you're looking at, and that's every time you go, you're going to, for the rest of your life, you'll have to kind of look at it each time and look carefully. The spotted salamander eggs are in an outer jelly coat. They also have individual eggs in there, but then there's this outer jelly coating. So, and those, if you were to hold them up, is like holding a blob. It's not the dripping, because they're really all in one packet, if you will. So they're different in that regard. And again, you don't you have to hold them to know the difference, and I'll show you that in the next slide. I just wanted you to know that was a difference. The next picture will really help, because here, this is really going to be the thing that go to vernal pools, and I can't stress enough, maybe some of you, it's great to go out and look at them, and you really can go anytime between, April to into May and really see things happening there. So it's not like you have to hit it on one weekend. I mean, it's a whole season of vernal pool activity with things changing, and there's always something to see. So the wood frog eggs, if you see them often, you got pictures that were characteristic of what you typically might see. So there, everything on the left is wood frog, and then spotted salamander on the right. So wood frog eggs look pretty dark under the water. They actually, you might not see all these little blackish. That black is not a coincidence. It's black heat, right? We all kind of know that don't wear a black t-shirt when it's like out, right? So that's good because of year when it's cold, these tend to need a lot of heat and energy to grow. They also, this is one of those rafts I was talking about on top of the water. It looks like a bunch of, oh, there's something bubbly and something there. If the light is hard on a vernal pool, I encourage you all exploring to just buy some of those cheapo, what are they called? The sunglasses. Would you?
HoloLens.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. I mean, you can wear your nice like skiing Oakleys too, but I'm just saying like the one, just get some of the drugstore just to kind of cut down on some of that glare, and then you can see better. You can also see in to the water. So that's a great example of that raft. Now, the spotted salamander, again, we're not talking about salamanders, but I really have to talk about them because not only do they have the outer jelly coating, as you can see around it, but I should probably use the pointer, not my hand. So jelly, but this is pretty typical from my experience, and there might be people that don't have this experience, but in my experience, it's often this goldish, coppery color of the eggs. Doesn't mean they're always like that, and I'll show you something below in a second, but if you see a sac like this and they sort of have that pretty coinish color, that's another thing that might indicate that it's the spotted salamander. And then down here, this I want, so important. Spotted salamander egg in two varieties. There are the clear ones, which is this, and there are, you kind of don't see them here, but there's one, I think that's one, maybe this, right? So you could see this that one, there's a clear mass like that. And then they come in this cloudy form. And there's absolutely nothing literally too genetic. It's just you've got the gene, one of the genes to do the other when you're a spotted salamander. So they just have two types. The other thing you'll see in both kinds of eggs, both meaning frog eggs and salamander eggs, is you'll see greenish. So you'll see a green sac, and that's algae that is colonizing the egg mass. That's not a bad thing because that algae is bringing oxygen in. It's you're exchanging oxygen with the plants, or it's also food for those developing tadpoles, and they will eat that algae when that's one of their first food, encased algae that's there. Okay. And then I guess I just wanted to say tadpole, all of these eggs, I've mentioned this before, concentrating on the frogs for a minute. The eggs, the tadpoles, I can't stress how vulnerable they're. Food for everybody. I mean, everything in the wood, land animals, you'll see. When I go to vernal pools, I see owl feathers by the pool. I see raccoon tracks constantly. They're always right around there in the mud. I see, so everybody wants to eat these. And in the water, when you look down in with your polarized glasses, you often see little things moving around the egg masses. Sometimes it's other tadpoles actually eating earlier egg sacs. Sometimes it's little caddisfly larva, the little fly larva that creates its own little casing. There's this little thing moving around and it's eating. So there's a lot, and then nymphs and larvae of all kinds of insects, and then other creatures, including other frogs. Okay, and then oh my gosh, what's that? Anybody have any idea? What are we looking at? What eggs are these? It's a trick question. Okay, these I'm showing you because they're not eggs at all, but sometimes you'll see them if you spend any time on Maine's ponds and streams. They're not uncommon in Maine at all. They're bryozoans. This people used to call, I don't really hear it as much, but call it a moss animal. They're colonial animals, like the way that coral is a colonial animal. It's a whole lot of animals banded together in a community. And they're filter feeders in water. So they actually have these little hair-like cilia. They're called feed in the water. I mentioned that. And you find them around when you're kayaking or whatever. You'll see them on submerged vegetation branches. You'll see them on the supports for your dock, and you'll see them on boat lines. They're oftentimes on if the boat's been tied up for any length of time.
What do you call it?
Bryozoan, Bryozoan, and it actually does mean moss animal. So,
perspective, like how big would it be?
yeah, that's a good question. The perspective, because this picture doesn't really tell you.
They look huge.
Yeah, they can be quite large. I mean, they could be like this, but you often will see them. I'm not sure these are though. I think these are on a branch, so you can see them. Sometimes you just see them like this. Sometimes you see them bigger. They actually, this picture doesn't make them look very attractive because they're out of the water, so they're not supported now, except gravity's pulling them. But in the water, they can be much more of a rounded shape, and you'll see the different shapes like hexagonal or circular of the. Just show these two to differentiate. These aren't vernal pool. These are in lakes and ponds and river. I've seen them in the Saco River, and they're indicators of clean water. When they're crying out in their marshes and their wet areas, they're going to be loud, partly because they're loud from their vocal sacs, but partly because they're climbing up these branches to get up as high as they can. So they are tree frogs that use these little pads here, little toe pads to kind of grip and go up and climb. I just wanted to show you that the eggs here are very different. You were asking about eggs. This is like underwater reeds. So it's an area like I would picture it to be in a marshy area like this. So the submerged reeds and grasses, and they just plop little individual eggs along them. So some adaptation, some advantage to not having them be in a group in that type of environment for some reason. The other thing to just simply mention here that's interesting about their lives is that we all know that the males sing, the females are attracted to the singers. And research has shown that it's not the loudness, it's actually the rapidity, like how fast they can sing, the speed. And then I guess it's better lung control or something. But there are these opportunistic males called satellite males that hang out. They don't sing. They're hanging out and then they intercept as the female is approaching the great singer. It's sort of like, seeing the guy across the bar or whatever, and then somebody comes up and hands you a cocktail in between. Like they're in the middle, and then they will mate. So that's kind of another adaptation that allows them for some success in getting their reproductive their genes into the genetic pool. Okay. Our other tree frog is the gray tree frog, also common tree frog. So that the scientific name Hyla, that's actually that genus name is sometimes there's another genus name they use now, so I'm not going to worry about that. But the versicolor, again, just means multicolored. It can be different colors. It can change its colors. So even though it's called gray tree frog, you'll see them in different shades. And here, I just want to mention that that its camouflage is really good. I mean, look at how lumpy and bumpy it is. This one, we can see this frog looking at us right here. But if you were, that's tiny. If you're walking through the woods, that looks like a little piece of, a gall almost you can't tell. And here on the bark, right, you're going to see, you're not going to see too much. Now they are attracted to light, or I should say, I don't know if they're attracted to light, but I think they're attracted to the, insects. So they come to where the light is on your windows sometimes in the summer. And you'll sometimes, I don't know if any of you have seen them, but they'll kind of stick to your window. Yeah, it seems like you all have. So that's good. So here they have, it's not first of all, that's a tree frog, right? You look at those, it's like, and this is the tree frogs, by the way, as like a genus think about how many different species there are, innumerable, probably undiscovered in the Amazon. We have one in Maine, but that's okay. We've got a lot of trees. They make it work. And they also are very freeze tolerant. So are the spring peepers. So those 3 that we've now looked at are all pretty good. They're very good with cold temperatures. Look at the frog's back. This is just in case. This is a not a cross as much as what they call it sometimes a star. It's just like a little bit of a bigger design, but mostly you're just going to see the bumpy, lumpy, warty look and the toe pads and where it is, and you'll know. But I do want to quickly play you the song because, and you'll know why in a minute. Do we have it? I'm sure we do. Yeah, because you probably hear this all the time, and you might not know, you might be thinking it's a bird. You might know very well, better than anyone, but I just want to play it for those of you. At night, we've got peepers behind it too, but okay. So that's short and short trills. And I have been, so I live down in Portland, and where I was one night, ran out to the TJ Maxx that's out by the mall, and I suddenly heard from behind the building so many of those trills. And that makes sense because Clark's Pond is kind of behind there. And it was just alive, summer night, just alive with tree frogs back there. Kind of made me want to go explore the behind, but probably not a great idea. So, okay. So I haven't been talking about what these frogs, adult frogs, eat, but across the board with frogs, some commonalities. They're very opportunistic feed. They will eat a lot of different things. They're not picky eaters, but mostly it's insects, snails, spiders. Spiders are big for these types of frogs that we're looking at. Okay. And also these tree frogs are more common in the southern part of the state. They are not like in Aroostook County. You're not going to really find as many of them. Okay, so I think that next is, now we're moving on to our to our group that's the grass frogs, and we'll kind of go through. So this is the northern leopard frog. This is sometimes people call this the spotted frog, and you might recognize this from biology classes as the classic lab frog. Okay. So found in fields, meadows, pastures, farmland, especially in the evenings and the afternoons. They eat beetles. They love to eat crickets. They're usually green, but there's a brown type, and that's why I showed you this. So you can think of them as a green frog, but really you will sometimes see the browns. And there's fascinating research about this, which is that the brown frogs breed for some reason. It's just a genetic thing. The brown type breeds very quickly, and they get in there, get in, get out, and the tadpoles leave the pond where they breed, and they come out as adult frogs quicker. The greens breed slower. It takes them a longer time. There's an advantage in each case. The browns are less likely to be predated and eaten in the pond because they're out quicker. The greens are grow bigger, so then later, if they survive, they have better reproductive success because they're just bigger, stronger frogs, healthier frogs. So that's interesting, but they both have an advantage. And then I just want you to notice this is going to look very much like the next frog, almost to the point where it's going to drive you mad. So just look, the biggest thing to think about is the pattern. And the pattern is this, actually, I'm going to have you look at this frog because this is a good example. Just spots. Just think like a leopard. It's spotted, right? That's how it's got its name. So the legs will have more banding, but up here on the back and the sides, that's where you want to look. Dots. I mean, there'll be some longer ones. That's why this one was a little tricky because you'll see why in a minute. But this one, dot, they're rounder. Okay. Just a quick other thing to mention that I have to mention that's not so great news about these is that they used to be the most common frog in Maine, believe it or not. Now they're a species of special concern. And why? I mean, nobody really knows. There's a lot of, and it might not be one reason. There could be a variety of reasons. There's a very bad fungus that is threatening frogs all over the world. And also they have one thing that was interesting from the Big Night Project, which is a citizen science project that you guys may have participated in. that there's data now showing that this type of frog, the northern leopard frog, has the highest mortality rate on our roads. For whatever reason. Okay, lastly, this frog hibernates in the winter under streams and underwater and in the shallow pits in the ponds that it makes. Like, it kind of makes a little sandy pit for itself. And they've even been found hibernating under turtles. Interesting. Okay, so now we've got the pickerel frog. See, very similar. The pickerel frog has that yellow underneath. I should have said the leopard frog is white underneath. This one has some of the yellow. You can see it down there. That is all, like in nature, these bright colors really signal poison. So there is a toxicity in the pickerel frog. It's not enough to bother like a bald eagle. They eat them. Other animals will eat them. Owls eat them. Herons, of course. Mammals, and even some fish, but snakes avoid them. That's a huge predator of frogs. Snakes are kind of a two-way street with frogs. They both will eat each other. And sadly, also the Big Night program found this out, unfortunately. When you put them in a bucket or a holding container with other types of frogs, the other frogs will die. There's something, it's that permeable. So there's something about that toxin that affects reptiles and amphibians. So are there any fishermen in the room? There was sort of I read somewhere once that the pickerel frog name came from that they were good bait for pickerel. I wasn't aware, quite candidly, that pickerel were desirable fish to be fishing for. I mean, I know they are fished for, but they're kind of so I don't know, maybe that's where it came from. But that I would think maybe because they're in pickerel weed together, but I don't really know. Somebody can tell me. This is the thing I was going to show you, is that this design is not dotted on the back as much as two rows. Pickerel frogs, just think of them as neat and tidy. They want to have two rows of elongated, like rectangular. Again, you're going to see a frog hopping in the grass. It may not be something you can look at right away, but if you can grab a picture or something, you might be able to figure out which one it is. And then here's just what I was just telling you. So we've got the northern leopard frog, kind of classic green, has dots on it. And the pickerel frog, classic, would be brown. Again, that one could be brown, this one could be green, so that doesn't always help, but this is more of the classic. And the pickerel has the rows right there. These rows are I showed this one because they're not even broken up. That's how rectangular they are. Okay, and then this is just a quick, I don't even know with our internet if this is going to work, but I'll try. This is a one that's under the ice because, as I mentioned, they spend the winter underwater, getting their oxygen from the subcutaneous breathing, the skin. And he's moving under the ice. It's a little hard to see, but I don't know if you can tell there's an ice layer there. I think this is a pickerel because I've stared at it a million times, but it's really hard to tell. Okay. So then we know this one. Oh, before we get to this one, I'm just going to send a quick, the pickerel, and this is good to know, the pickerel and the northern leopard frog, okay? Northern leopard frog. That's sleep apnea is what that is.
Yeah. Let's say it sounds like Bob.
And then, so you can, it's like, okay. Then the pickerel frog. Whoops. Also snoring, but a little bit of a more, how would you describe it? Motorcycle. Maybe motorcycle. Sometimes people say like a comb, the one across a comb, Anyway, okay. But now, so since we're doing that, let's introduce this guy. I think you know this one. "30 seconds, it's a long trill." And then another male comes in a different pitch. They'll have different pitches. That's how you know it's different individual. Okay.
What frog is that?
This is the American toad. It's Maine's only toad. We only have one type of toad. Well, that is a toad, if you can hear that, that's a female telling a male to get off of her, or it's a male telling a male, you made a mistake, get off of me. So somebody's saying to get off of me. This is what that was. But this is that trill. To me, that's the sound of a Maine summer night on a screen porch playing cards, right? That's just, you're hearing that toad, it's going on, it will not stop. But then there's another toad that comes in a little bit of a different pitch again. So that, and when they all come together, which we didn't really hear in there, but it's kind of a nice sound, actually. It's kind of but it is trilly and kind of, kind of jungle sound or something. So, Maine only has one toad, and toads are just, biologically, they are frogs. There really isn't a difference. They're the same genus, or same, I should say the same order, not the same genus. And then, but they're because frogs are different genuses too, is what I mean. So they're the same order. They're amphibians, and they're the tailless amphibians. So anyway, you'll see. Oh, you know what? My video kicked me out of yeah, here we go. This frog, toad, is I grouped with the pickerel and the northern leopard because, again, land. They're up in the uplands. They're not spending their adult lives always in the water. They're on land, so meadows. And then these guys are obviously in very dry areas, hot areas. And so what are their adaptations? They've got rough and warty skin, right? So that's going to help protect their skin in these kind of dry environments. And with sun, their legs, they've got shorter back legs and longer forelegs. It's kind of the opposite of frogs. And they're sort of they certainly need to hop, but they also need burrowing power. They're doing a lot of burrowing into the ground, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And that's partly for hibernation, partly for defense if they need to get away, partly just to cool off. Again, that temperature, ectothermic, they need to cool off when they need to. The other thing to know about, you all know about toads, is those big parotid glands on their head. Those two big lumps. Though actually everybody has parotid glands. We have them too. They're here in our jaws underneath. For us, they create their saliva, and is generated there, or starts there. The process starts there. Here for the American toad, there are toxic secretions in there, and animals know this. I mean, you'll have, again, predators that sort of know that these are, maybe stay away from these because they don't taste good, they're poisonous, etc. But as you all know, here again, the American toad really has that relationship with snakes we talked about. You'll see toads eating snakes, you'll see snakes eating toads. So they're both predating on each other. And actually, I'll just take a second to say that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, that's something that was going to be important, which was to say, we've got these frogs are kind of really right in the middle of that food web. I mean, they eat a lot, and a lot of things eat them. They are really important for any ecosystem that they live in because they are feeding that ecosystem, and they're also controlling and feeding on that ecosystem. So they overwinter underground. I think you all probably know they just burrow in, and you'll also, in the summertime, you'll see them, of course, under lights a lot. They'll hang out by a door that has a back door with a light because they're looking for the insects that go there. The tadpoles are these big, dark colored ones. You often will see sometimes one of the darkest ones you'll find. And then their eggs are very unique. They're the only frog eggs that look like that. They're these long strings. You sometimes can't see them because they'll sink down, they'll go under plants, but sometimes when they're first laid, you'll see these strings. Okay, and then we get to our last group, and this group is our pond frogs. So we've got the first one is kind of the most iconic frog, I think of it, the green frog. The green frog is the classic cartoon banjo picking frog who's sitting there on the, okay, that's what a green frog is. So this is how it sounds, and you've heard it lots. Banjo, okay. And then their name, Rana, just means frog. Clamatans means screaming, like calamity, okay? Calamitous. And I'll go, here we go. Come in a minute. That scream before he jumped in. They scream. And sometimes you'll just walk up to the shore. You don't even know a frog's sitting there, and you'll hear that scream and then the splash. So green frogs, highly aquatic, really rarely away from the water. They're not like, I have seen a green frog in the grass before, but it's generally going to be in the water. Look for the prominent. This is one of the two. Wood frogs have this too, but the prominent, this is called the dorsolateral ridge. It just means it goes alongside its body on the sort of the top plane. This long, it goes down the length of the body. There it is again. Okay. The other thing I want you to look at is these two both look pretty green, but so I wish I kind of had put another picture in here, because oftentimes the green might stop at the head and then the rest is kind of brownish. They really have a graduated coloration. There's one form that's very rare, but some kids found one that were camping at like a 4-H camp or something in Maine that was blue. They have really beautiful, looks like a Amazon frog. Anyway, but that's very rare. The other thing I want to point out, because it's fun to just tell your friends that you have this secret knowledge. This is called the tympanic membrane. It's the eardrum that you've all seen on frogs. If it's roughly the same size as the eye, that's a female. If it's larger than the eye, like here, that's a male. So the big eardrums are the males. So they overwinter at the bottoms of streams and ponds, again, underwater. On warmer winter days when you go up, or even in this, in the spring when there's still some ice, you can sometimes see them moving around underneath. And then, but also, this is important, that tadpoles also overwinter in permanent water bodies like lakes and ponds and streams and rivers. So you're not going to use a vernal pool, because that vernal pool might dry up by summertime. They're going to need a permanent water body. And then also the eggs and the tadpoles are toxic and don't taste good, and that does inhibit the fish predation. So that does help them in those permanent water bodies where there are fish, unlike a vernal pool. So that's a great adaptation for them. And then here is our second pond frog, just for fun. Let's just hear him, because why not? You all know that one. And then very much like the green frog, this one will also shriek sometimes. So this looks like, here again with the eardrum, what do you think, male or female here?
Female.
Yeah, I think so too. This is the one I know is a male from, just because I know that individual. Here, this is a good, this was one of each. There was this, I didn't take this picture, but there's a picture of a green frog and a bullfrog. And can you tell which one? Well, I put the arrow in, didn't I? So I guess you do. But so I like this picture though, because they're the same size. So it's not even, think of a bullfrog, and a bullfrog does get much bigger. It can get up to 8 inches, which is crazy. But you really can see here that there's no dorsolateral ridge. There's no ridge here, right? That goes down the length of the body. Here there is. So that's a green frog. We know that. And here, the bullfrog, there's none here. What we do have in a bullfrog is like spectacles. Here's the line. It goes down like that. So it goes around the eardrum and down. So it's just like having a little, ear eyeglasses. I think of bullfrogs as our most dill pickly frog, because look at that. I mean, they have that fat kind of not, they don't look as in shape as the green frog. They're a little bit bumpy. And the biggest thing that I can tell you about the bullfrog is that to remember about bullfrogs is they are voracious predators and eaters. They eat anything. They eat small birds. They eat fish, of course. They eat other frogs. They even eat other bullfrogs. They just want to eat all the time, and their mouths are huge. So if it fits in their mouth, they will eat it. And they are native to the eastern U.S. I mean, they're part of our ecology and our ecosystems. They were introduced out west as food for the legs, and that was not a great idea. That they've taken over and they've become a real problem out there. So that's an issue. So here is our last frog, and it's the mink frog. Now, I have never seen a mink frog because they are not really, I don't know, to be honest, how, well, they're not common in this part of Maine. They might be here actually, but they're generally from like mid-Maine north. Okay. I think that you could probably find some around here. And they're so associated with aquatic environments. This is exactly what you're going to see. And that's a painting by my husband, so I had to put it in there, but that's exactly their habitat. That's their lily pads, lots of vegetation in a pond. That's where you're going to see them. So here's one. That one actually happens to be sitting on some kind of woody material, but it's probably in a pond in that picture. They're actually very beautiful frog, I think. And they sound like putting two drumsticks together, just like drumsticks. They require lots of oxygen, lots of cold water. They breed in the summer, and they're called mink frogs because they do have I don't usually sniff frogs, but when you lift them, I guess they have a musky kind of skunky scent. So finally, we've looked at all the frogs now. I just wanted, this is my only slide that had like a lot of words in it, but I just wanted to say those adaptations we've been talking about, I just really want to leave you with the thought that they're all such amazing adaptations, and they make frogs so fascinating to us, but they do create some vulnerabilities in the world we live in. And, you've got these great defenses like camouflage and the ability to jump, the ability to hide, being poisonous and being able to, I didn't even talk about the vision, but they really can see, because you have to know, or is my threat coming from above or is my threat coming from below, right? If you're a frog. So they have this 180-degree vision on each, so they can see almost 360 almost. And they move, let's take move and migrate through territories and ecosystems. That is a great way to live because you're using energy from all kinds of different types of sources. But what does it mean on our roads in Maine on rainy nights, right? It's high mortality. The ability to have flexible respiration, to breathe in different ways, amazing. But what does it mean to have permeable skin when there are toxins and things in the environment that are sprayed on grasses or sprayed? How do those meadow frogs do when somebody's using Roundup? That's a particularly bad one for them. That's why I mentioned it. And then of course the varied diet. They eat all these insects. They eat all these invertebrates, little larvae and things. But we all know there's been this insect collapse over the last few decades that no one has quite been able to figure out. But they talk about the windshield that we used to have when we were kids that were covered in bugs when you got where you were going, and now it really isn't anything you notice anymore. And then of course tolerance for a range of temperatures. It's probably serving them well, but what will it mean when there isn't enough snow for them to freeze solid or to be under the ground? We don't know. I mean, these aren't questions. These are questions. They're not answers. I'm just saying that's what makes animals so vulnerable. They have a lot of strengths, but they have vulnerabilities. I did add the last one. They have other strengths that we don't even know about. This is the problem with the Amazon rainforest destruction. There's so much there that we just never learned or haven't learned. But we do know that they're studying some frogs here in Maine. I mean, there are frogs in Maine that have cancer resistance. They're just don't have the they're able to knock out cancerous cells. I'm just putting this in my understanding terms. Which could be very fascinating to understand how that works. But we've got a huge frog extinction event happening right now. We're in our third decade of it, actually. So, you know, this is something that's going to be dealt with and thought about. Lastly, I just want to give a shout to this Lang Elliott is his name. He's a, if you guys don't know who he is, I really do. And I just, you know, I met him because I wrote to him once for this presentation years ago. But he is a, what do you call it, like a sound recorder, and goes out into nature. I think he lives, don't quote me, but like North Carolina or something, or maybe upstate New York, but somewhere not in Maine. But this is his website, and there's a lot more than just frogs. But those recordings I got were from that site. He did give me permission to use them, and they're really beautiful recordings. So I will leave you there with, that's it for the frogs. But I'd love to. I'm conscious of time if people have to go, but I just, if there were any questions, I'm also happy to answer.
How long will a frog live?
Yeah, how long will a frog live? You know, they can live, they can live a few years. Like a life of a frog is going to be highly, what's the word? Vulnerable because of where because of where they are in that food web, right? They can, you know, they can almost be eaten as soon as they hatch. But and in captivity, people who have, you know, pet frogs, they can live, you know, longer, obviously. So I think their lives are actually curtailed by the conditions they live in for the most part. But a couple of years, 3 years, you know, something in there. But I don't know that there's anybody that could really tell you, actually, because I don't think there's a way to. I don't think there's been any kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like a individualized survey of like tagging a lot of frogs to really get that data. It's a good question. Yes.
Do frogs breed in the same pond as other frogs, and would that be toxic to other frogs?
Oh, good question. Do pickerel frogs, the ones I said have that toxin, breed in the same ponds as other frogs, and would that be, you know, a problem? They do breed in the same water bodies as other frogs, and you know, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I suspect that that the breeding, I don't know is the answer, but I'm wondering if just the breeding process itself is such a short-lived aspect of being in that pond, and that there's enough dynamic, you know, yeah, exactly, for the size and the what am I trying to say? The water and the air, it's like can where, as opposed to what I said before, which was that they were in a receptacle, like a bucket or a container. Yeah, it's contained. So I think that would probably, my guess is that would probably be okay, but that's a good question.
If I pick up a toad or the pickerel frog, whatever, is it toxic to my hands? It's like, will I get a rash or?
It's real. Yeah. There's the toad toxin and the pickerel toxin. Yeah. Are they irritating to human skin? Not really. I mean, I actually wondered that myself, because I wondered if like I think for the most part, no, that people don't get irritated by these things. But I did wonder about that, if like there are people with extreme sensitivities, like who are allergic to them, but I didn't really find a lot about that, actually, interestingly enough. So I think that, I mean, I feel like I can't say there's nobody who's ever been injured by one, but it's not a common thing for a human to have. I think we're like the mammals that really aren't impacted by too much by those toxins. That's been thank you for saying that, because everybody used to believe that you could get warts from toads, but you really can't. I also will remember a toad urinating on me when I was, do you all have you had that? Yeah. When you lift it up, and again, just a defense, I think, just to say, you know, I will also mention 2 citizen science projects, just to, you know, that I mentioned one, which was the Big Night project, which is it's not really one night. It's actually a series of, you know, rainy nights over a certain temperature. And you can go on that website, and maybe some of you already do that. And it can be you kind of monitor for an hour or more a certain like third of a mile or something like that section of road, where maybe you can take notes. Sounds like have you done that, or has anybody here? Yeah.
There's, like I said, there's that vernal pool that I live close by.
Yes.
And they have certain times, and people that'll go and
perfect.
walk and watch to see how many.
Yeah, perfect. So you just go on the website and kind of learn. Yeah. And then the other one I wanted to mention was the a project that's been going on for like almost not quite 40 years, but it's continuing to go on for Maine's Department of Inland Fish and Wildlife. It's the Maine Amphibian and Reptile Atlas project. Its data has been extraordinary for very understudied or understood, if that's a word, information about the body of reptiles and amphibians in Maine. Where do they live? How many do we have? You know, and the data that's been coming in from just citizens is amazing. And you put it, it's a website, and you can just Google it and go there. But the book that the third edition now of Maine Amphibians and Reptiles is out, and this book really draws upon that citizen data and scientific and data. It's the Maine Amphibian and Reptile Atlas project.
And the name of the book is
The Maine Amphibians and Reptiles, third edition.
Okay.
I actually have every edition. I have the first edition, second, and this one. I can't get rid of them. I don't know why. I'm like, you should think that you could get rid of the early ones, but I don't want to. I'll leave this here so anybody can look at it too. Thank you all very much. It's been a great.
We hope everyone will join us next week for the last presentation of the Winter Lecture Series. It's the
Yeah,
Secret
let me get
Life
my-
of Furries.